This ski report has been brought to you by Roller Chevrolet, 665 Munros in Monterey, home of the Nova and Vega hatchbacks. I don't know what the weather is. Mae, how's the weather today? You give the weather report.
You mean the weather outside or the news?
Oh,
the news is hot.
The news
weather's nice.
Oh, okay.
The weather's
good.
not as hot as the news.
Okay.
But it's going to pick up. Things are going to get hotter. Should we go on to Dialogue Conspiracy? Okay, here we go. Every week when we're through with the news, I hope that we'll have a quiet week where we can sit down the following time we get together and discuss academically some of the processes by which conspiracies take place, specifically in the United States, the way that you overthrow a country as large as this and effect a coup d'etat. But each week we have so much news coming in on various methods that I can't stay with one part of the way a government is overthrown. I'm going to jump around to a lot of different subjects today and just cover a lot of things that are in the news, and then you can pick up your papers and follow them from there. This program, for those who haven't listened before, is based upon 10 years of research into political assassinations in the United States and then the murders that followed following the murder of President Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King. There were hundreds of murders that have followed since that were part of the same systematic overthrow of the electoral process and to keep the power in the hands of a few of the conglomerates. So the news is coming, 1972-73 is a year where we're coming to a peak of power, but the power structure is struggling because it was exposed at the Watergate Hotel, and it's holding on to its position, which is getting whittled away a little bit every week. And I can't say, I really do enjoy, I have to admit that I enjoy to see it all come down. The Watergate will take the news from now on through the next year. I think it'll be the news for years to come in the United States of America. The Watergate stories as they broke this week, I'm not going to get all of them. Time carried an excellent article. The daily papers are carrying excellent articles. The article this morning from the San Jose Mercury, Nixon's lawyer is a paid spy. I take pride in saying that the article that I published was published in The Realist that I wrote, and it came out in August. They're available at the Thunderbird here in Carmel, on how Richard Nixon really came to power, was an explanation that Richard Nixon has been an espionage agent since 1945, that he was the selected agent for the Cold War, the front man for the conglomerates. And I have never seen in print any article yet to suggest that outside of believing that he was a Republican, he was more than a Republican. He was an espionage agent placed by certain people who control the Republican Party. And we're getting pretty warm now, and the news comes out. That article came out in August of '72. If Nixon's lawyer is paying spies, and he is handing out money for espionage or sabotage against the Democratic Party all over the country, because the money that Kalmbach gave to Donald Segretti went all over the United States, and he was only one of 50 other people that were working like him. The boss is a spy, too, and the evidence will unfold for years to come, but you find today in the news this week that the admission that Kalmbach, the attorney for Richard Nixon, was handing out money to Dwight Chapin, the appointment secretary for Richard Nixon, who was giving it to Donald Segretti. Now, of course, at this point, Kalmbach is saying he didn't know what the money was used for. $30,000 to $40,000 was given in a particular time period to an espionage agent who used to live here on the Monterey Peninsula. It was in the Judge Advocate's office in Fort Ord, Donald Segretti. It becomes pretty obvious when they get $10 to $20 million siphoning through Mullen Associates, and then it goes through various different hands and through the Treasury Department. Segretti was paid from the Treasury Department. It becomes very obvious that these men are just handed lumps of sums of money, and in innocence, Kalmbach says, I don't know what he did with it. You can be sure that Nixon's lawyer, who would protect Richard Nixon against any suit of anything illegal or wrong, he represents him as his personal lawyer, would want to know what Donald Segretti is doing with $40,000 or $30,000. And the subject came up because of the Senate investigation of Patrick Gray, whether he should be the head of the FBI. Of course, none of these people were called by Patrick Gray or prosecuted in the federal case that just went through, and they were immune from any questioning, and nothing has been surfaced yet about these people in terms of legal documents. Now these FBI reports are coming out, and Patrick Gray said, we've gone as far as we can go in this public forum. We can't discuss it anymore. At this point, he said, I can't tell you, your committee, anything else because it borders on the question of national security. Well, L. Patrick Gray isn't kidding about national security. He can't talk to the Senate Judiciary about the Watergate for the same reason that Earl Warren said you can't see in the archives what's locked up about the assassination of John Kennedy. National security is the very last word they have left. That holds the lock over the door. The key can't get into the evidence, because who would be so unpatriotic to want to jeopardize this country by exposing the multiple assassinations and murders and sabotage that's going on in this country? Those doors are locked. But Gray just says it's national security that you can't know any more about what's in my FBI memos, and your staff members can't see it. A few congressmen sit in my office for 8 days, 8 hours a day. We'll let you read some of these papers, but I can't give you any more information. The Senate committee is getting very angry now and said if we don't have John Ehrlichman, we can't have Patrick Gray pass as the head of the FBI. We won't recommend him if we don't get Mr. Ehrlichman to release John Dean, the president's attorney. Now, Nixon's other attorney besides Callback was John Dean, and in every hearing where witnesses were called to investigate the Watergate case, Dean sat there as the attorney for Richard Nixon. So you know who this espionage was for. His personal attorney sat in on all of the questioning of each of these people, and this man was suspect himself. They got wind of every question asked, every witness that was to be called. They controlled the witnesses. They told Segretti, they gave him questions that he would be asked at the grand jury. They told him they would be easy. When you reconstruct the Watergate and break it down into the way the evidence is lining up, it's exactly the way the Warren Commission was run, but everybody accepted it as a truth because the men weren't caught in the act. The excuse they used this week, Patrick Gray used, for not calling Martha Mitchell as a witness was that John wouldn't allow him to. Well, Herbert Callback, Nixon's attorney, was the man allegedly who took Martha Mitchell to a hospital where she had stitches and was treated medically, and said that the people who did this to her should be arrested, and she had been seen cops and robbers games. So if Patrick Gray didn't want to know anything about Herbert Callback from the Segretti angle, he should have known about Martha Mitchell, except that he was staying at the same hotel. And that hasn't, the congressmen who are investigating haven't gone into that. I sent a letter to the members of the Senate Judiciary this week reminding them that Patrick Gray was at the same hotel that Fred LaRue and Mardian were. They didn't call in Robert Mardian, the Assistant Attorney General, and the Senate Judiciary wants to know about that. Mardian went with Fred LaRue to the committee to re-elect the president and helped destroy all records the Monday after the men were arrested at the Watergate Hotel. I think that Patrick Gray is going to have a hard time passing the Senate Judiciary. It would be a terrible day for America if he gets through. And I really urge all of you to use your efforts to write to Senator Tunney. He's on the committee. John McClellan's on the committee. Sam Ervin is on the committee. The Senate Judiciary, and tell them to please keep asking more questions of Patrick Gray about the shooting of Wallace, the bullets at the Maryland Shopping Center, the Martha Mitchell episode out in California. The letters matter. I really feel that I urge you every week to write letters, and I know that they matter in some cases, and when people take an interest, it does make a difference. There was one thing that I asked a few weeks ago about writing to the California Supreme Court, the important question of whether people arrested have the right to choose their own attorney, because there's many people in San Quentin that are sitting on what was death row or would be if they brought it back again, who would prove their innocence if they had their own attorney. It's a matter of life and death to them. It's only a letter in your hands. And this week, the California Supreme Court turned down the right of these particular prisoners at the Adjustment Center or any others who want their own attorney. The article in the paper this week, a very small article, it was 2 inches in our paper here in Monterey, but it affects so many lives of people in prison, whether they're going to live or die or ever get out or have a trial. And the Supreme Court ruled 4-2 this Tuesday that in the lower court they may name any competent lawyer for a criminal defendant, that the defendant does not have a chance to appoint his own lawyer. And they use the example of Fleta Drumgo, who's up at San Quentin now, who's one of the San Quentin Six, and he wanted a particular lawyer to represent him at the trial that's coming up, Richard Hodge. And the Supreme Court said no, 4-2, he has to use the court-appointed lawyer. That's just like saying you have no chance to prove your innocence. They don't introduce the evidence that would allow these men to prove their innocence. The prosecutor appoints the defender, the defense lawyer. We saw it out in Salinas with the trial of Hugo Pinell, where the prosecution appoints the defense and they don't bring any witnesses or evidence in to allow those particular people to prove that they were innocent. And I'm sure that if more people had taken this letter seriously and flooded them with letters to show how much you care about these particular people whose lives are on the line, there would have been a change in the attitude. There was an example of that with the riot down in San Diego, with the race riot on Kitty Hawk. And the NAACP came in on this particular thing and found that a witness had perjured himself at the riots, and there were black men that were put in the hole in the brig and convicted and given stiff sentences. And a particular group of private investigators took it upon themselves to follow, and this is what we have to do. People have to begin doing this. They followed the man who had spoken against a particular witness. Michael Lorry was a white sailor, the principal government witness. And he testified on the stand that he had no racial animosity and that he saw a particular sailor, Cleveland Mallory, punch and kick a white sailor during the riot. So the NAACP hired its own undercover agent, which is what we are going to have to do to survive against this system, is not accept those trials or what they're saying is true. They hired their own undercover agent who became friendly with Michael Lorry, and they took tape recordings of what Michael Lorry said, and he said that he admitted he lied, that he lied on the stand about the blows that he saw Mallory strike, and he stated that if he had a gun, he himself would have shot at least 30 of them blacks, that he hated the blacks, and that he had lied on the stand. So the NAACP took this evidence and said that here was perjury, that the Navy withheld evidence, absolute evidence that this man had lied. They encouraged him to lie, and they had sent Mallory home with a bad conduct discharge and so forth. Well, after private investigators came in and found this witness, it changed the whole effect of the trial, and the man does not get a bad conduct discharge. And the Navy right away came back and said, we're changing the conviction. It's reversed. And they said, we're wiping out the conviction on this case, but it had nothing to do with your lawsuit. We did it on our own. And that was an untruth. It was only because a few private citizens cared that one particular man did not get the discharge that would blacken his career, that would keep him from doing other things that he wanted to do when he got out, or keep him in the brig longer. It was because some private people cared and got their heads together and found the real truth, that one person's life, or many people's lives, are changed. I want to talk this week, there was an article by Jack Anderson about the CIA and Alan Dulles and the spy planes on dirty tricks. And it's about a book coming out in review. A Mr. Prouty, who used to work with the CIA, is coming out with a book. He was Air Force Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty, and he worked with the Pentagon, and he was a support officer for the CIA for 9 years, and he supplied material, and he was in London. And now he's writing a book on the dirty tricks of the CIA. And Jack Anderson refers in his article to one or two of the tricks. But I want to mention that 2 years ago, this May, I came here to the KLRB News Department to do a analysis or discussion of the Pentagon